Every major intelligence agency on Earth is currently monitoring the same patch of dark sky, and not one of them trusts the others with what they're finding. This isn't an astronomy problem, it's a trust problem. Because when an interstellar object with profoundly anomalous behaviour makes its nearest approach to Earth on December 19th, the first instinct of every superpower isn't cooperation, it's control. America will seek monopoly, Beijing will choose concealment, Moscow will pursue chaos. And somewhere between those competing impulses, humanity's first chance at contact with something from beyond our star is about to become humanity's oldest excuse for conflict. Stay with me. Over the next 2 hours, I'm going to walk you through the exact geopolitical nightmare that unfolds when aliens become less dangerous than our own terrified tribal hearts. This is the simulation nobody wants to run, because the results are too ugly, too plausible, too close to the fractures already splitting our world apart. We like to imagine humanity uniting in the face of the unknown, speaking with one voice, extending a hand in friendship to the stars. That's the fantasy. The reality is messier, darker, and infinitely more human. So, buckle up. The clock is ticking, December 19th is coming, and when it arrives, the world splits. Before we go deeper, tell me this. Where are you watching from right now? What's your local time? And do you believe your government is being honest about what's in the sky? Leave it in the comments. And if you're as captivated by this as I am, subscribe now. You won't want to miss a single development as we count down to the day everything changes. Let's establish the baseline. The object we call 3I Atlas is only the third confirmed visitor from interstellar space we've ever seen. The first was Oumuamua, that strange tumbling cigar that shot through in 2017 and left us with more questions than answers. The second was 2I Borisov, a well-behaved comet that acted like a comet. 3I Atlas is different. Its core is somewhere between 440 meters and 5.6 kilometers across. We can't be sure because measuring something moving at 137,000 miles per hour, peaking at 153,000 near the Sun, presents certain challenges, but size isn't what keeps scientists awake. Chemistry is. A comet's coma, the cloud of gas and dust around its nucleus, is typically dominated by water ice. 3I Atlas's coma is dominated by carbon dioxide. The ratio of CO2 to water is about 8:1. That's bizarre. That's not how solar system comets behave. The volatile profile, the specific cocktail of evaporating materials, doesn't match anything we've catalogued in 4.6 billion years of cosmic neighbourhood watch. Then there's the composition. Recent studies show the outer layers of 3I Atlas bear the scars of galactic cosmic ray processing. Imagine drifting for millions, maybe billions of years through the void between stars, constantly bombarded by high-energy particles. Those particles cook your surface, alter your chemistry, create a reddish spectral signature, and build up a thick irradiated crust. The meaning is simple and terrifying. What we're observing on the surface might be nothing more than cosmic scar tissue. It might not reflect what's inside at all. The parts we can see may be hiding something fundamentally different underneath. So, let me ask you a question. What if 3I Atlas isn't just a comet? What if it's the first real interstellar probe, a machine designed by a civilization we cannot imagine, sent to do something we cannot predict? I'm not saying it is, I'm saying the possibility exists, and that possibility changes everything. Because here's the thing about possibilities. Intelligence agencies don't wait for confirmation. They prepare for contingencies. Right now, quietly, military and space assets across the globe are being retasked. Satellites are being repositioned into new, suspicious orbits. Communication networks are being secured and isolated. Ground stations that were studying pulsars last week are now locked onto a single moving point in the sky. Nobody's announcing this, no press conferences, no diplomatic briefings. But the pre-contact posture is shifting, and once that shift begins, it becomes a cascade. The thesis of everything you're about to hear is simple. The alien is not the threat. We are. The arrival of 3I Atlas, whether it's a rock, a relic, or something in between, will tear open alliances that took centuries to build. It will trigger power plays that make the Cold War look like a playground dispute. It might, if we're unlucky or stupid or both, reshape the entire world order in a matter of days. You think I'm exaggerating? Let me walk you through what happens next. The United States will attempt to build a wall in space and exclude everyone else. China will try to establish a secret encrypted channel that bypasses the entire world. Russia will sabotage anyone who gets too close. The global economy will convulse and potentially collapse under the mere rumour of alien energy technology. Private corporations will become rogue actors. Small nations will find themselves suddenly and inexplicably at the white-hot centre of human history. And all of it, will happen before anyone confirms whether there's actually something listening on the other end. This is First Contact as a geopolitical thriller. This is the reality we've built for ourselves. Let's start with the moment the world splits. On October 30th, 2025, 3i Atlas passed perihelion, its closest point to our Sun. By December 19th, it will reach its closest approach to Earth's orbit. This alone demands attention. But here's what haunts me. What happens when that attention transforms into action, and that action tears us apart? Picture the day after closest approach. It's December 20th. 3i Atlas has passed Earth's orbital plane and is continuing outbound on its hyperbolic trajectory, meaning it's not bound to our solar system, it's just passing through. But suppose something happened during that approach. Maybe there was a brief anomalous radio emission. Maybe the coma brightened in a pattern that doesn't match natural outgassing. Maybe absolutely nothing happened at all. But the uncertainty itself is the catalyst. The United States Space Force, operating under a newly drafted protocol I'll call the Guardian Playbook, declares a planetary defense perimeter around the object's trajectory. They label 3i Atlas a strategic asset of unknown origin and intent. They invoke existing space law, creative new interpretations of it, or brand new executive orders written in the frantic 72 hours after closest approach. The reasoning is airtight from a security perspective. An object with unknown properties and an exit trajectory poses an unacceptable risk. Therefore, all communication with the object must be coordinated, monitored, and controlled through a central authority. That authority, conveniently, is them. How do you enforce a perimeter in the vacuum of space? You can't build a fence. You can't station guards. You control the signals. The tactics involve systems, let's call them Atlas VB blocks, designed for jamming or intercepting any unauthorized transmission aimed at the object. Ground-based and space-based monitoring assets would track every radio telescope, every amateur transmission, every satellite uplink. Anything attempting to communicate with 3i Atlas without a Space Force seal of approval gets shut down, jammed, or simply never reaches its target. You create an electromagnetic moat and you dare the world to cross it. The institutional sidelining happens fast. NASA, the agency built for exploration, finds its scientists politely but firmly escorted out of the decision-making rooms. International space science bodies receive carefully crafted talking points instead of invitations to collaborate. This is no longer a scientific question. It is a defense question. And defense questions are answered by people with rank insignias, not PhDs. The reaction from other nations is exactly what you'd expect. Fury masquerading as diplomacy. Formal protests flood the United Nations. Emergency sessions are convened. Smaller countries without space programs demand multilateral protocols. Larger countries with their own capabilities begin quiet, urgent preparations for non-compliance. The diplomatic language is measured. The subtext is a scream. Nobody wants to be locked out of history. Nobody wants to trust a single geopolitical rival to speak for all of humanity. The moral outcry erupts when the news leaks, because it always leaks. A mid-level bureaucrat at NASA, watching a lifetime of international scientific collaboration get shredded, posts a cryptic tweet that goes viral in minutes. Someone in the intelligence community, horrified by the unilateral power grab, sends an encrypted file to a journalist. Whistleblowers emerge. Media speculation explodes. Public opinion fractures along painfully predictable lines. Some support the monopoly in the name of safety and decisive action. Others see it as imperial overreach, a dangerous seizure of humanity's collective future. Still others simply panic, because the very existence of an exclusion zone implies there's something worth excluding. But here's the real risk, the one whispered in secure briefing rooms but never said aloud. Whoever controls First Contact defines humanity's narrative to whatever intelligence might be listening. If the United States speaks for Earth, then Earth sounds American. American values, American priorities, American assumptions about power, hierarchy and negotiation. Maybe that's fine. Maybe it's a disaster. Maybe the alien intelligence doesn't care, or maybe it cares very, very much. The way we introduce ourselves in those first fragile moments could determine whether contact becomes cooperation or catastrophe. So the gambit is underway. Space Force has drawn its line in the cosmic sand. The rest of the world is deciding whether to respect that line or cross it. And in Beijing, in a secure facility buried deep and shielded from prying eyes, a very different calculation is already being made. A calculation built not on exclusion, but on secrecy. While the United States moves to establish its electromagnetic moat, a different strategy is unfolding 8,000 miles away, one that views the American gambit not as a threat, but as an opportunity. China is no longer a spectator in space. It operates the 500-meter aperture spherical telescope, the largest filled aperture radio telescope on Earth. It has deployed quantum communication satellites believed to be unhackable. It maintains its own space station, has rovers on Mars and the far side of the Moon. The capability to observe and transmit to deep space objects exists within its borders, independent of Western infrastructure or permission. That independence is the foundation of everything that comes next. While American diplomats file formal notifications at the United Nations, crafting legal justifications for their exclusion zone, China adopts what I'll call the silent listener strategy. No public announcements, no diplomatic grandstanding, just quiet, methodical, and irrevocable repositioning of assets. Space-based surveillance platforms adjust their orbits by fractions of a degree. Ground stations in the remote, radio-quiet provinces of Xinjiang and Qinghai retask their massive antenna arrays. Encrypted communication channels, the kind hardened against both espionage and jamming, go from dormant to active. Everything happens below the threshold of an international incident, but nothing happens by accident. The technical heart of this play is quantum key distribution, a communication method that uses the principles of quantum mechanics to create theoretically unbreakable encryption. Information is encoded in the quantum states of individual photons. If anyone tries to intercept or eavesdrop, they collapse the quantum state, immediately alerting both sender and receiver to the intrusion. This isn't speculative science fiction. It's operational technology deployed on Chinese satellites right now. And if you wanted to send a message to an interstellar object without anyone on Earth knowing its content, quantum encryption is how you do it. Why choose secrecy over diplomacy? The reasons are cold, calculated, and none of them are comforting. First, bypassing Western-dominated bureaucratic channels means avoiding Western veto power. In a consensus-based model, the nation with the loudest voice or the most allies controls the narrative. Secrecy circumvents that entire structure. Second, and more critically, establishing a direct bilateral channel with an alien intelligence, should one exist and choose to respond, grants unimaginable strategic leverage. You become the sole intermediary, the translator, the gatekeeper. Every other nation, including the United States, would have to come through you. You write the terms of the exchange. Third, and perhaps most cynically, if the gambit fails, if no signal is returned or if the transmission is detected and jammed, plausible deniability remains intact. Deny everything. Attribute it to rogue, overzealous scientists. Move on without losing face. But imagine the gambit succeeds. Imagine that 3i Atlas, or whatever consciousness it may represent, receives the encrypted transmission and responds on the same quantum channel. Suddenly, and without warning, a single nation on Earth possesses knowledge no one else has. A conversation is happening in the dark and half the planet doesn't even know it's begun. The implications are staggering. Technology transfer, if such a thing is possible, flows to one point. Diplomatic recognition, if aliens care about such things, is bestowed upon one government. The entire balance of power on Earth shifts overnight, not because of a weapon or an economic treaty, but because someone in a control room in Beijing asked a quiet question into the void and something answered. The paranoia this triggers is immediate and all-consuming. American signals intelligence agencies at locations like Pine Gap and Buckley Space Force Base detect unusual, high-power transmission patterns emanating from Chinese ground stations. The signals are directed along the precise ephemeris of 3i Atlas. The content is encrypted with protocols that defy current decryption capabilities, so they can't confirm what's being said, but the directionality and timing are screamingly suspicious. Russia's space forces pick up similar anomalies. European allies in the Five Eyes intelligence network share corroborating data. No one knows for certain, but everyone suspects. And in the high-stakes game of geopolitics, suspicion is often indistinguishable from fact. Accusations fly in secure backchannels, terse denials are issued through official spokespeople, but it's in the public sphere where the damage truly metastasizes. Conspiracy theories explode across global social media platforms, each more elaborate than the last. Did China make first contact? Is there a secret treaty? Are they already receiving alien blueprints? The information environment becomes so polluted with speculation, disinformation, and panic that actual truth, if it ever emerges, would be nearly impossible to verify or believe. Trust, already fragile, begins to shatter. International forums like the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space devolve into shouting matches. Allies pressure China for transparency. China refuses, citing national sovereignty and the blatant hypocrisy of the American exclusion zone. Smaller nations, terrified of being locked out of history, start making brutal, realpolitik choices, aligning with whichever superpower they believe will give them a seat at the table. The multilateral world order, built painstakingly over decades, starts to fracture. And through it all, 3Y Atlas continues its silent outbound journey, a mute witness to the chaos its mere presence has ignited. Yet, while China plays the long game of secrecy, another actor with a very different history and a very different set of tools is preparing a strategy that doesn't aim to win first contact, but to ensure nobody else can either. This actor cannot match American resources or Chinese technological pace. Its space program, while historically legendary, operates on a fraction of their budgets. It cannot win a conventional race. So it does what asymmetrical actors have always done when facing stronger opponents. It changes the game entirely. The goal is not victory, but paralysis. If Russia cannot be first, then no one will be first. If Russia cannot monopolize contact, then contact itself will be rendered impossible. Russia's strategy is one of elegant, ruthless simplicity. Become the spoiler. You don't need superior telescopes to blind those who have them. You don't need better encryption to corrupt the data flows of your rivals. You need creativity, audacity, and a profound willingness to burn every bridge behind you. The opening moves are digital. Cyber attacks are the obvious devastating starting point. Western astronomical observatories, the massive installations in Chile, Hawaii, the Canary Islands, rely on networked computer systems for data collection, analysis, and coordination. These systems are vulnerable. The goal isn't to destroy the physical telescopes, a blatant act of war. It's to corrupt the data they produce, to make science itself untrustworthy. Introduce subtle, creeping errors into observational datasets. Trigger false positives in signal detection algorithms. Cause critical servers to mysteriously reboot during crucial observation windows. If scientists in the United States, Europe, and Japan cannot trust their own measurements, they cannot confirm what 3i Atlas is or what it's doing. Uncertainty becomes a weapon. The next target is the global network of collaboration. The world's understanding of 3i Atlas is built on data-sharing platforms, collaborative software, and real-time feeds between institutions across continents. Imagine targeted malware introduced into these systems, designed to lie dormant, propagate slowly, and then activate simultaneously at a predetermined hour, shutting down coordination at the exact moment it is needed most. Or imagine a distributed denial of service attack, flooding the servers of the International Astronomical Union with junk data, overwhelming them when astronomers are desperately trying to compare notes. The goal isn't permanent damage. It's temporary, strategic blindness at the moment that matters. But the most psychologically dangerous tactic lives in the realm of information. The false flag alien broadcast. Picture this scenario. 72 hours after closest approach, a signal appears. It seems to originate from the precise direction of 3i Atlas, transmitted on frequencies deemed optimal for interstellar communication. The signal contains complex repeating patterns, mathematical sequences, prime numbers, maybe even rudimentary pixelated imagery. It is detected first by a network of amateur radio operators in Europe, spreads like wildfire across online forums, gets picked up by independent researchers, and goes globally viral before any government agency can authenticate it. The world erupts, governments scramble, news networks run with first contact confirmed headlines. The public oscillates between euphoria and terror. Then, days later, the forensic analysis comes back. The signal didn't come from 3i Atlas. It originated from a cluster of compromised satellite ground stations in former Soviet bloc countries, carefully coordinated to mimic a deep space source. The transmission was a fabrication, a sophisticated malicious hoax, a false flag, and by the time the truth emerges, the damage is irrevocable. Trust is atomized. How can anyone believe the next signal? When a legitimate transmission potentially arrives, it will be dismissed as more propaganda, more noise in an already toxic information environment. The conversation with the cosmos collapses before it can begin. Russia's strategic goal is achieved through this induced paralysis. If no single power can reliably verify communication with the object, then no single power gains a decisive advantage. The playing field, perversely, is leveled again. This chaos also serves Russia's immediate terrestrial interests. Consider energy markets. If the world becomes convinced alien energy technology is imminent, the value of oil and gas, the lifeblood of the Russian economy, plummets overnight. But if doubt, confusion, and chaos prevent any clear confirmation of contact or technology, the status quo persists. Markets stabilize out of uncertainty. Russian revenue continues to flow. It is survival through sabotage. The campaign is amplified by relentless psychological warfare. Russian state media and its global network of allied propaganda outlets begin broadcasting a tailored barrage of narratives. For Western audiences, stories highlighting American imperialism and recklessness, framing the exclusion zone as a dangerous power grab that could provoke alien hostility. For audiences in the global south, narratives about Chinese secrecy and neo-colonial ambition, warning that Beijing might strike a deal that sacrifices the interests of poorer nations. For domestic audiences, tales of Russian scientific vigilance and spiritual preparedness, standing strong while the decadent West panics. The goal is cognitive overload. Too much information, too many contradictions, no stable ground on which to build a consensus. The tactics are old, Cold War subversion, information operations, but the scale and stakes are unprecedented. This isn't about influencing an election or destabilizing a region. It's about sabotaging humanity's introduction to the cosmos. And if that introduction fails because we were too busy sabotaging each other, well, that would be a profoundly human tragedy, wouldn't it? The risk of escalation is terrifyingly real. If American or Chinese cyber forensics conclusively trace the data corruption, or the false flag signal back to Russian military intelligence units, retaliation becomes inevitable. Not kinetic military strikes, not at first, but devastating counter-cyber operations targeting Russian infrastructure. Coordinated economic sanctions that dwarf those imposed after the invasion of Ukraine. Diplomatic isolation. A rapid retaliatory spiral begins, consuming diplomatic bandwidth and political will precisely when global coordination is most desperately needed. And while the major powers are locked in this digital and diplomatic trench war, 3i Atlas continues its journey outward, indifferent to the storms of fear and deceit raging on the pale blue dot it passed by. Yet, there is a dimension to this crisis that transcends military posturing, espionage, and diplomatic maneuvering. It is a force that operates on a faster, more brutally rational clock, the global market. While governments scramble for strategic advantage, financial markets are already reacting to the mere possibility of what 3i Atlas might represent, and that reaction could collapse the global economy before anyone confirms whether there's an alien at the wheel. Financial markets run on expectations, not reality. The moment credible rumours seep into the bloodstream of the global economy that 3i Atlas might contain, transmit, or represent access to advanced technology, especially energy technology, those expectations undergo a seismic shift. And when expectations shift in the energy sector, the foundation of the modern world convulses. Let me paint the picture. It's December 21st, 48 hours after closest approach. Unconfirmed reports leaked from intelligence sources to financial analysts suggest spectroscopic analysis of the object shows anomalies inconsistent with natural cometary composition. One report vaguely mentions potential non-thermal energy signatures. Another uses the phrase unexplained cyclical thermal emissions. The language is cautious, hedged, deliberately speculative, but financial analysts are paid to read between lines and act milliseconds before certainty arrives. The opening bell on global markets is a symphony of panic. Oil futures crater by 15% in the first hour of trading. Natural gas follows. Shares in ExxonMobil, Saudi Aramco, Gazprom and Shell begin a sickening slide. The reasoning is primitive and powerful. If alien technology exists, and if that technology includes advanced energy generation, zero-point energy, compact fusion, antimatter reactors, anything beyond our combustion-based paradigm, then the entire fossil fuel industry becomes obsolete not in a generation, but overnight. The valuation of these companies isn't based on next quarter's profits, it's based on the net present value of reserves still in the ground. If those reserves are about to become worthless, so is the company. The dominoes begin to fall with terrifying speed. Energy exporting nations watch their sovereign wealth funds hemorrhage value. Russia's federal budget, over two-thirds dependent on oil and gas revenue, faces a liquidity crisis within days. Middle Eastern monarchies, their social contracts and stability built on petrodollar flows, see their currencies wobble and credit ratings plummet. Norway's massive sovereign fund, a model of careful management, loses trillions in paper valuation as its energy assets collapse. Venezuela, already teetering, tips into complete state failure. The contagion is not limited to energy. Commodity markets spike and dive in chaotic, unpredictable patterns. Lithium and rare earth elements, critical for current renewable technology like batteries, initially surge as investors bet on a transitional demand boom. Then they crash just as violently when a research note points out that alien tech might render our concept of renewables just as archaic as coal. Gold, the traditional safe haven, sees wild swings as investors flee risk but cannot agree on where safety lies. Currencies tied to commodity exports, the Canadian dollar, the Australian dollar, the Russian ruble, the Norwegian krone, plunge. The US dollar, the euro, the yen, all experience volatility not seen since the 2008 financial crisis. Stock markets globally enter correction territory. This isn't just about energy stocks, it's about everything. Because if energy becomes virtually free or limitless, the cost structure of the entire global economy changes. Transportation costs evaporate. Manufacturing is revolutionized. Entire industries built on energy scarcity, distribution and efficiency, from shipping conglomerates to utility giants, are suddenly questioning their reason for existence. The uncertainty alone triggers mass, automated sell-offs. The bond markets for energy export states freeze, then collapse. Who lends money to a government whose primary revenue source just became the economic equivalent of horse-drawn carriages? Bond yields spike to catastrophic levels as investors demand impossible risk premiums. Several nations find themselves instantly unable to refinance existing debt. Default, once a theoretical risk, becomes a looming certainty. International financial institutions, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, begin drafting emergency stabilization packages, but the scale of the crisis immediately outstrips their resources and their imagination. The political fallout is immediate and violent. Governments are caught in impossible binds. Do you publicly deny the rumors as baseless speculation, risking utter calamity and loss of credibility if contact is confirmed tomorrow? Do you acknowledge the possibility to appear transparent, thereby accelerating the very panic you're trying to prevent? Do you impose capital controls, halt trading, freeze markets? Every option carries the seed of social unrest and political collapse. In energy-dependent economies from Texas to Siberia, unemployment spikes overnight as projects are cancelled and investments vanish. Protests over gas prices turn into riots over food shortages as supply chains seize. Regimes that looked stable a week ago face existential threats. Paradoxically, the Global South, nations that import rather than export energy, initially appear poised to benefit. Cheaper energy should mean economic stimulus, liberation from crippling import bills, a chance to leapfrog development stages. But the financial contagion spreads faster than any benefit can materialize. Global credit markets freeze. International trade contracts as panic dominates boardrooms. The same nations that hoped for relief find themselves cut off from the loans and foreign investment they need to capitalize on the changing landscape, trapped in a new kind of poverty, irrelevance amidst upheaval. Philosophical questions erupt in trading pits and cabinet meetings alike. Is the gift of unlimited energy actually a gift if its mere promise destroys the political and economic structures that have maintained global order for a century? If alien technology upends the geopolitical map overnight, who fills the power vacuum? Which nations adapt and rise, which collapse into chaos, and what fills the violent, unstable transition between the old world and the new? Here is the truly disturbing part of this spiral. All of this financial and societal carnage happens before anyone confirms whether 3i Atlas actually contains a shred of technology. The panic feeds on possibility, on rumour, on the primal fear of being left behind. Markets are crashing because of what might be true, not what is true. We are destroying our own civilization over a hypothesis. By the time credible information emerges, if it ever does, the damage will be done. Global wealth will have been violently redistributed. Power structures will have shifted. Entire nations may have ceased to function. And the question we've been avoiding becomes unavoidable. If this is what we do to ourselves when an alien object simply passes by, what hell will we unleash if they actually want to talk? But governments and markets are not the only actors in this drama. In the chaos, in the widening cracks between official authority and public panic, other forces are starting to move. Forces that don't appear in diplomatic cables or financial reports. Forces that operate on belief, curiosity, or sheer anarchic impulse. And they might be the most dangerous of all. Earth has no unified protocol enforcement mechanism for shouting into the cosmos. Let that sink in. We have traffic laws, air traffic control, maritime regulations, but when it comes to aiming a transmitter at the stars and pressing send, it is essentially a free-for-all. Anyone with enough power and a parabolic dish can broadcast whatever they want into the void. And if 3i Atlas represents a listener, that void is about to become a cacophonous Tower of Babel. The problem is a catastrophic lack of coordination. Major space agencies have protocols. The SETI Post-Detection Protocol, the Declaration of Principles Concerning Activities Following the Detection of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. These are thoughtful, voluntary guidelines crafted over decades by scientists and lawyers. They recommend international consultation, careful message construction, a unified voice. But they are just that, recommendations. They carry no force of law. They do not bind the thousands of other actors who now, faced with the reality of a target, will decide to participate. Consider the amateur radio operators. Tens of thousands of them are spread across the globe, a vast decentralized network of enthusiasts with powerful homemade transmitters and deep technical knowledge. Many have spent decades listening for alien signals through projects like SETI at home. Now, an actual interstellar object is within reach. Do you think they will wait for a UN committee to draft a statement? Do you think they will seek permission from a government that is jamming signals or hoarding data? Or will they craft their own messages, mathematical primers, images of Earth, musical selections, and transmit on their own schedules, each hoping to be the one who made history? The answer is obvious. They will transmit. Then add private research laboratories, funded by billionaires with strong, often idiosyncratic opinions about humanity's place in the cosmos. Some of these labs, like the Breakthrough Listen initiative, have capabilities rivaling national observatories. Their funding is private, their mandates shaped by philosophical visions, not political consensus. If a donor decides humanity's first message should consist of the complete works of a specific philosopher or a treatise on a particular economic theory, that is what will be sent. There are no oversight boards with veto power. Next, layer in religious organizations. Various faiths have deeply held theological frameworks for extraterrestrial life. Some see it as a confirmation of a creator's grandeur. Others view it as a spiritual threat, a test of faith, or even demonic. Still others interpret first contact as the fulfillment of specific prophecy. Imagine a well-funded, fervent ministry decides that preaching to alien intelligences is a divine imperative. They acquire time on a radio telescope, draft a message heavy with scripture and doctrine, and broadcast it before any secular authority can intervene. Is it illegal? Possibly. Does history suggest this will stop them? No. Finally, consider the communities that have been waiting for this moment their entire lives. The ufologists, the conspiracy theorists, the true believers. They have networks, websites, followers, and in some cases, significant resources. They are absolutely certain governments are hiding the truth. They will see 3i Atlas as validation and their chance to force disclosure or make contact themselves. Their messages might be coherent scientific arguments or chaotic streams of consciousness filled with claims about ancient astronauts and government cover-ups. It doesn't matter. The signal strength is the same. What you end up with is a distributed denial of service attack on an alien listener. Imagine hundreds, perhaps thousands, of simultaneous transmissions from every continent on different frequencies, using different modulation schemes, all aimed at the same retreating dot. Prime number sequences and the DNA helix, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and the latest pop hit, the Bible, the Quran, the Vedas, the complete works of Shakespeare, and memes. Absolutely someone will try to rickroll an alien civilization. From the perspective of Three-Eye Atlas, if anything is listening, this would appear as pure, undifferentiated noise. Not a thoughtful, unified greeting from planet Earth, but a screaming, contradictory, chaotic babble. How does an intelligence interpret that? As vibrant cultural diversity, or as the symptom of a planet-wide psychotic break? We have no idea. Historical parallels are grim. In the early days of radio, before international treaties, the airwaves were a chaotic mess of overlapping signals, deliberate interference, and jam wars. Commerce and communication suffered until order was imposed, but that order took decades to negotiate. We do not have decades. We have days, maybe hours after the world realizes contact might be possible, before the flood begins. The immediate consequences range from benign to existential. Benign. The alien intelligence ignores the noise, filtering for a coherent, structured signal amidst the din. Catastrophic. It interprets the chaotic barrage as itself an act of aggression, a form of informational warfare, or a sign that this species is too unstable and fragmented to engage with safely. Its response might be permanent silence, or its response might be something else entirely. Regional wildcards exacerbate the problem. A university observatory in South Africa, a national space agency in India, a newly built facility in Chile, each might feel compelled to send their own message, seeking prestige, scientific discovery, or simply acting out of a sense of patriotic duty. Each new transmission adds to the noise, increases the risk of a tragic misunderstanding, and further diminishes the chance of a coherent species-wide response. The moral question underneath this chaos is deceptively simple. Is letting everyone try to speak better than letting one authority control the message? Democratic chaos versus authoritarian silence. Both options carry profound risks, both could lead to disaster, and we're about to find out which one humanity, by default, and in the absence of any prepared mechanism, will choose. Because choosing the better path would require a level of global coordination we demonstrably do not possess. But while Earth threatens to drown the cosmos in a cacophony of human noise, another problem is emerging, one that ties the physical infrastructure of contact directly to the volatile forces of the market and the state. The private corporations that built the modern space age, the entities that own the satellites, the ground stations, the rockets, are about to find their billion-dollar assets caught in a geopolitical vice, and their response might be the most unpredictable factor of all. The privatization of space infrastructure happened gradually, then all at once. For decades, space was the exclusive domain of governments. Only nations possessed the resources, will, and bureaucratic scale to reach orbit. Then the cost curves bent. Reusable rockets became a reality. Private capital flooded in. Companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, Arianespace, and others now operate capabilities that match or exceed those of traditional space agencies. A critical fraction of Earth's space-based communication, observation, and launch infrastructure is privately owned. This seismic shift becomes paramount the moment Three-Eye Atlas is declared a strategic asset. Those private ground stations in Texas, New Zealand, and the Azores, those constellations of commercial satellites, those corporate launch pads, they're no longer just business assets. They're choke points. Whoever controls them controls the planet's ability to listen, observe, and potentially speak to an interstellar object. And governments, when faced with what they perceive as an existential stakes scenario, have a long and unambiguous history of seizing control of critical infrastructure. The timeline compresses brutally. Within hours of any confirmed anomalous activity from Three-Eye Atlas, or even just the political decision to act as if there were, governments begin invoking emergency powers. In the United States, the Defense Production Act grants the federal government sweeping authority to compel private industry to prioritize national defense contracts. In this climate, that legal lever is pulled hard and fast. Notices are served. Satellite uplinks at private facilities are commandeered. Ground station schedules are erased and rewritten by military officers. Corporate executives, used to negotiating with commercial clients and investors, suddenly find themselves facing colonels and intelligence officials whose concerns are not quarterly profits, but species-level contingency. Legal precedent is clear. During wartime or declared national emergencies, Governments have nationalized railways, steel mills, telecommunications networks. The justification is always the same: the national interest supersedes private property rights. Whether first contact qualifies as such an emergency is a philosophical debate. Whether governments will act as if it does is not. The space corporations are thrust into an impossible position. Their assets represent billions in investment and complex contractual obligations to global clients. Their shareholders expect returns. Their corporate philosophies are built on ideals of opening space to humanity. Now military commands dictate operational priorities. A scheduled launch for a commercial telecom satellite is scrubbed to make room for a classified payload aimed at tracking 3i Atlas. Communication bandwidth on a private satellite constellation is reallocated entirely to government signals intelligence. Encryption protocols on data downlinks are demanded to include government backdoors. The companies can comply and retain some semblance of operational control, or they can resist and face legal annihilation, asset freezes, and the full coercive power of the state. Some will comply immediately, seeing partnership with the state as inevitable or even patriotic. Others will resist. This resistance might be principled, arguing for the independence of private enterprise and the danger of militarizing humanity's first contact. Or it might be strategic, a high-stakes gamble that public outrage, international pressure, or swift court injunctions will force governments to back down. Either path creates operational chaos exactly when technical coordination is most critical. The new arms race is no longer just about rockets. It's about global network density, data latency, and encryption sovereignty. The nation that integrates the most diverse, resilient network of listening posts and transmission facilities gains a potentially decisive advantage. Countries without indigenous space infrastructure scramble to secure access through frantic diplomacy or commercial pressure, offering political favors or cash for a slice of bandwidth on a privately owned satellite pointed at the right patch of sky. Bilateral deals are struck overnight, testing old alliances and creating new, transient dependencies. But a more disruptive scenario now haunts the boardrooms and situation rooms alike: the rogue billionaire. Picture an individual with vast resources, a private space fleet, a network of ground stations, and a messianic conviction that governments are too slow, too secretive, too compromised to handle first contact correctly. Perhaps they believe they, and their vision for humanity, are the correct ambassadors. Using their wholly private infrastructure, they draft a message reflecting their personal ideology, be it libertarian, techno-utopian, or spiritual, and transmit it toward 3i Atlas without authorization. The governmental response would be immediate and extreme. Federal agents would seize physical facilities, assets would be frozen globally, arrests for violations of communications law, espionage statutes, or even treason would follow. The ensuing legal battles would last for years, but the precedent would be set in the court of public opinion within hours. Private actors cannot be trusted with species-level decisions. The narrative war would be fierce. Corporate spokespeople would frame it as a defense of freedom, innovation, and humanity's pluralistic voice. Government officials would frame it as reckless endangerment, a violation of planetary security, and an act of catastrophic arrogance. Public opinion would fracture along familiar ideological lines, further eroding any chance for unity. The inequality of capability sharpens the conflict into a knife's edge. Wealthy nations with robust private sectors can nationalize assets and maintain, or even enhance, their operational capacity. Poorer nations without indigenous infrastructure are utterly locked out, dependent on the charity or geopolitical calculus of others for access to information about an event that affects all humanity equally. The post-colonial dynamics are ugly and immediate. Resentment boils over in the UN General Assembly. Historical grievances about technological and economic domination resurface with fresh potency. The hopeful narrative of a unified humanity collapses under the weight of this material reality. First contact, like so much else, is accessible only to those with the money and the power. Meanwhile, the commercial space companies that manage to avoid outright nationalization face a different kind of threat. Their satellites and ground stations become targets for espionage, sabotage, or hostile acquisition by foreign intelligence services. Corporate security teams designed to thwart industrial espionage are utterly outmatched by state-level actors. Insurance companies reviewing their policies invoke acts of war or xenological events clauses, refusing to cover losses. A legal exclusion nobody thought would ever be relevant suddenly is. The technological advantage will flow rapidly to whichever entity, nation-state or public-private hybrid, can most effectively and ruthlessly integrate corporate agility with governmental authority and resource. This requires a foundation of trust, and as 3i Atlas speeds away, trust is the commodity in shortest supply on Earth. Yet, in all this chaos of state control and corporate defiance, a different, quieter scenario is becoming possible. One that nobody in Washington, Beijing or Moscow predicted. One that could be the most disruptive of all. What if the superpowers are simply ignored? Here is a scenario that haunts strategic planners in dark rooms. What if 3i Atlas, or the intelligence behind it, pays no attention to terrestrial hierarchies? What if it has no cultural context for American hegemony, Chinese industrial might, or Russian strategic cunning? What if its criteria for selecting a communication partner are based on signal clarity, geographic serenity, or some other metric we haven't conceived, and by chance or design, it chooses to speak not to a superpower, but to someone else? Consider the logic of an external observer. Earth is a blazingly noisy planet, electromagnetically speaking. Major population centers and industrial zones create a roaring static of radio, television, radar, and digital transmissions. But there are islands of quiet. Radio quiet zones exist precisely for astronomy. Remote regions chosen for their lack of human-made interference. The core sites for the Square Kilometre Array telescope are in the Karoo Desert of South Africa and the Murchison region of Western Australia. The high-altitude deserts of Chile host some of the world's most powerful optical and radio telescopes. These locations were selected for scientific reasons: clear skies, stable atmosphere, minimal electromagnetic pollution. Those same qualities might make them ideal listening posts, or clear channels for transmission, for an intelligence trying to establish contact with a noisy world. Imagine it happens. A signal, coherent and complex, is detected. It is not detected first by the sprawling arrays of the NSA or the People's Liberation Army Strategic Support Force. It is picked up clean and strong by a research facility in the Australian outback operated by a consortium of universities, or by a small but sophisticated observatory in Botswana, maintained by a Pan-African science initiative, or by a university station in the Andes of Chile. Nations with limited geopolitical weight, no permanent UN Security Council seats, economies measured in billions, not trillions. In an instant they are catapulted to the pivot point of history. The global scramble that follows is both desperate and predatory. Diplomatic delegations from every major power descend within hours, filling local hotels with analysts, security details, and intelligence operatives. Offers pour in, blank check grants for scientific development, promises of infrastructure investment, military assistance to secure the site. The chosen state faces impossible pressures. Its government, likely a modest democracy or developing world administration, is utterly unprepared for this vortex of global attention. Every decision carries existential weight. Accept too much help from a major power, and you risk becoming a puppet, your sovereignty hollowed out in exchange for access. Refuse assistance, and you risk isolation, economic coercion, or worse. Internal destabilization becomes a near certainty. Foreign intelligence services have an overwhelming incentive to ensure a friendly, pliable regime is in charge of the contact site. If the current government proves uncooperative or insists on a multilateral, transparent approach, then other options will be explored. Opposition movements suddenly discover generous, untraceable funding. Local media begins publishing devastating reports on government corruption. Protests, organised by mysterious new civil society groups, erupt in the capital. The goal is not subtle: regime change by any means necessary to install leadership that will grant exclusive access. The public reaction worldwide is a volatile mix of shock, envy, and bitter resentment. Citizens of superpowers struggle to understand why their advanced, powerful nations were passed over for some obscure country. Conspiracy theories metastasize. The contact is a hoax. The aliens are deliberately insulting the established order. The chosen nation made a secret pact. For many in the marginalized world, however, it feels like cosmic justice, a universe correcting for centuries of imposed hierarchy. The neo-colonial dynamic is immediate and naked. The aid and expertise offered by wealthy nations is not altruistic. It is a transaction for access, a down payment on control. The language is diplomatic, but the power dynamic is one of extraction. Smaller nations watching this unfold understand the playbook perfectly, and their faith in international cooperation or justice dies a little more. The contact state itself may tear apart from within. Factions emerge. One sees this as a miraculous opportunity for development and global relevance. Another sees it as a curse that will destroy their culture and independence. A third may want to auction the access to the highest bidder. Political coalitions fracture. Regional and ethnic divisions intensify. A nation that was unified the week before becomes a battleground of competing interests, all fighting over how to handle an alien attention they never sought. This scenario forces agonizing moral questions onto the global stage. Does any single nation, by accident of geography or technology, have the right to speak for humanity? Should the privilege of first contact go to the powerful, who have resources but also entrenched agendas, or to the overlooked, who might bring a fresher, less burdened perspective? Who deserves to be Earth's representative? The question assumes a good answer exists. It doesn't. Every possible choice distributes catastrophic risks and unimaginable benefits in wildly unequal measure. This debate, while raging, underscores a deeper, more unsettling uncertainty. Because despite all the speculation, the strategies, the geopolitical maneuvering, we still do not actually know what 3i Atlas is. And the latest scientific data suggests the answer may be stranger and far more physics-altering than anyone in a Situation Room has dared to admit. We must return to the science, because the science is where the foundations of reality begin to tremble. The confirmed data is already unsettling. A CO2-dominated coma with an 8.1 ratio to water, spectroscopic signatures of water ice, carbon monoxide, carbonyl sulfide, and silicate dust. A reddish spectral slope confirming heavy galactic cosmic ray processing, and multiple jets post-perihelion, some firing in directions opposite the Sun, anti-solar, defying simple solar heating models. This cosmic ray processing is key. It means the surface we are analysing is not pristine. It is irradiated scar tissue, chemically altered by millions or billions of years of bombardment in interstellar space. We are studying the outer crust, which tells us little about the core. That core could be pristine interstellar ice, or it could be something else entirely. Something that doesn't sublimate, something that doesn't behave, something that was built. Skeptics of a natural origin point to finer details. The polarization data, how the object's reflected light is oriented, shows an unusually deep negative polarization branch. This characteristic doesn't match typical comets or asteroids and suggests particle properties or surface textures outside normal ranges. The jet structures add another layer of mystery. Their complexity and the anti-solar ones imply an internal energy source, or a mechanism beyond passive solar heating. Comets are messy, so weird behaviour isn't proof of anything. But there is a mathematical tension emerging from the back-of-the-envelope calculations circulating in academic chat rooms and preprint servers. The mass loss rates implied by the observed jet activity and tail brightness, when calculated against the smaller estimated nuclear size, 440 meters, create a puzzle. The implied mass being ejected per month appears to exceed what a body of that volume could plausibly contain as volatile ices under standard comet models. If the nucleus is at the larger end of estimates, large to 5 km, the math works better, but then other observations like its overall brightness and thermal emissions become harder to explain. One unverified but persistent calculation suggested the observed jet activity would require depleting the equivalent of billions of tons of material per month, a rate that would evaporate a small icy body implausibly fast. This tension is the crack where possibility floods in. What if the assumptions are wrong because the object itself is wrong? What if 3i Atlas is not a natural comet but a probe? An artificial object designed for interstellar travel might use propulsion we don't understand. It might vent material deliberately for course correction. It might be partially hollow or contain vast internal reservoirs, throwing off our mass estimates. Its outer crust might be sacrificial shielding, a radiation-weathered shell protecting a functional interior. This is, I must stress, speculation. Natural explanations exist for every anomaly, but the possibility remains and it changes the stakes from profound to existential. If 3i Atlas is engineered, then someone built it, someone launched it, someone programmed its mission, and we have no idea what that someone wants, expects, or how it perceives us. This possibility creates a fatal rift between two communities who must work together: scientists and intelligence agencies. Scientists would demand more data, more observation, rigorous peer review before drawing conclusions. Intelligence and military agencies, operating on precautionary principles, would have to prepare for worst-case scenarios immediately. Is it a probe? Then it's a reconnaissance asset. Is it sending data? Then that's espionage on a planetary scale. The gap between these approaches, caution versus preemption, generates friction and mistrust that leaks into the public sphere, fueling further panic. For military strategists, an artificial three-eye atlas is no longer a curiosity, it is a potential threat. Not because it has demonstrated hostility, but because unknown capabilities demand defensive postures. You don't wait to confirm a weapon is armed before you take precautions. This mindset accelerates every gambit we've discussed. The exclusion zone becomes more urgent, the secret transmission more justified, the spoiler tactics more necessary. But it adds a new, darker layer. The scramble is no longer just about communication. It's about acquisition. It's about reverse engineering. It's about the nation or entity that gets physical or informational access to that technology first achieving a permanent, insurmountable advantage. The prize is no longer just first contact. It's potentially the future direction of human civilization itself. And that terrifying elevation of the stakes brings us to the darkest, most human possibility of all. Because if the prize is that ultimate, and if trust is already ash, then the temptation to lie, to fabricate, to create false evidence of contact for strategic advantage becomes almost irresistible. We must now talk about the conspiracy layer, not as fringe theory, but as a near-certain geopolitical tactic. We need to confront the possibility of fabrication head-on. Once multiple major powers possess the motive, means, and opportunity, the likelihood that one of them attempts to fake alien contact approaches certainty. And a well-executed forgery could be more destabilizing than genuine contact. The scenario is chillingly straightforward. A power that perceives itself as losing the conventional race, perhaps unable to enforce an exclusion zone, break quantum encryption, or position itself as the chosen contact point, decides to manufacture the ultimate strategic asset, the appearance of alien endorsement. The signal would need to be impeccable. It must appear to originate from the precise trajectory of three-eye atlas, using correct frequency ranges and modulation schemes for interstellar communication. With control over distributed ground stations or satellites, spoofing a deep space origin is technically daunting, but feasible for a state-level actor. The content, however, is where the true manipulation lies. A simple "hello" would be too vague, too easily dismissed. But a message containing sophisticated mathematical constructs, physical constants, or, critically, information about Three-Eye Atlas's own composition that has not been publicly released. That would be compelling. Intelligence agencies have access to classified sensor data from space-based telescopes. Weaving these verified, secret details into the fake message would create a powerful veneer of authenticity. The most dangerous version is what I'll call the alien mandate gambit. The fabricated message does more than say hello, it explicitly chooses a side. We have observed your civilizations. We recognize the government of Nation X as the legitimate representative of planet Earth. All further communication will be channeled through this authority. Others should defer. Imagine the global shockwave. The chosen nation claims validation from a higher cosmic authority, a mandate that transcends terrestrial politics. Its rivals scream fabrication, but are immediately on the back foot. They must prove a negative about a signal from light hours away. You cannot send a forensic team to Three-Eye Atlas to check the transmitter. Signal authentication at interstellar distances is notoriously vulnerable to spoofing. You're left analyzing the signal itself, a digital artifact that can be engineered to perfection. The global reaction would be instant and catastrophic. The targeted nation's populace might swell with a mix of pride and religious fervour. Opposition parties would be silenced under banners of planetary unity. Rival powers would denounce the signal as a brazen fraud, demanding independent verification that can never truly come. They might launch counterclaims. We received a different message, or our analysis proves it's a fake. The media ecosystem would shatter into incompatible realities. Social media algorithms would amplify the divergence. pushing populations into sealed informational bubbles. The concept of objective truth, already under assault, would be obliterated. Religious interpretations would pour gasoline on the fire. Some groups might see alien endorsement of a specific nation as a divine sign, the fulfillment of prophecy. Others might decry it as a satanic deception, a test of faith. The same message would be weaponized in diametrically opposite ways depending on the believer. Political movements would seize the moment. Authoritarian regimes could cite the alien mandate to justify crushing internal dissent as sabotaging humanity's dialogue. Democratic activists within those countries would brand their governments as liars, risking everything to expose the truth. The danger of these sealed echo chambers is existential. Once a population invests its identity in a narrative, we are the chosen, or they are lying to us, contradictory evidence is rejected. When the actual truth eventually emerges, perhaps months later through painstaking international forensic analysis, significant portions of the global population would refuse to accept it. The invested belief would be too central to their worldview. The worst-case outcome is a global conflict triggered by a lie. Two nuclear-armed powers, each utterly convinced of its own righteousness, one believing it has a cosmic mandate, the other believing it is confronting a monstrous fraud, escalate through diplomatic rupture, economic warfare, and ultimately military mobilization. The aliens, if they are even out there, would return to find a planet scarred by paranoia and war, fighting over a message they never sent. Here is the truly disturbing epiphany. Even if no one fabricates anything, even if every signal is genuine, the mere proven possibility of such a forgery poisons the well of trust so thoroughly that authentic contact becomes indistinguishable from deception. We have cultivated an environment where the truth cannot be recognized, even when it is shining down on us from the stars. This internal weaponization of uncertainty might be our most formidable filter. But to understand the full scale of what we might be missing, we must pull back from the immediate crisis and look at the cosmos through a wider lens. Because while we tear ourselves apart over one object, our fundamental understanding of reality is being upended in laboratories right here on Earth. The universe is revealing itself to be far stranger than we knew, and that strangeness makes the existence of something like 3i Atlas not just possible, but perhaps inevitable. While the world has been fixated on 3i Atlas, a quieter revolution has been brewing in the world of fundamental physics, one that suggests our entire framework for reality might be a small porch on a vast, dark mansion. For decades, physicists have been meticulously measuring a property of the muon, a heavier cousin of the electron called its magnetic moment. Our crown jewel of physics, the Standard Model, predicts this value with exquisite precision. But the experiments, most recently at Fermilab, keep measuring something different. The discrepancy is now at 4.2 standard deviations. In particle physics, 5 sigma is a discovery. We are on the brink. This MON G2 anomaly means the moon is wobbling in its magnetic field slightly faster than our best theories say it should. Something is missing. Something is influencing it that we haven't accounted for. This isn't a rounding error, it's a crack in the foundation of reality, hinting at new particles, new forces, or entirely new sectors of physics lying just beyond our perception. Candidate explanations sound like science fiction, but are treated with dead seriousness. Leptoquarks that bridge categories of matter, additional Higgs bosons, or most intriguingly, dark sector particles. This last one is crucial. The dark sector hypothesis proposes that most of the universe is matter, the 85% we call dark matter, is part of a parallel reality of particles and forces that interact with our own familiar matter only through gravity and perhaps the faintest of whispers. We are in this view blind to most of existence, like fish unaware of the air above the water, only sensing its effect through ripples. Now, connect this to 3i Atlas. What if the comet-like appearance, the CO2, the dust, the jets, is merely the tip of the iceberg, the tiny fraction of the object that interacts with our sector of physics? What if its core structure, its propulsion, its intelligence, is built from or operates on principles of the dark sector? We would be analysing the exhaust fumes and calling it the engine. We would be fundamentally incapable of understanding its technology, not because it's complex, but because it's built from a different kind of stuff that our instruments are blind to. An alien civilization that has mastered dark sector physics would wield capabilities that seem like magic to us. propulsion without reaction mass, energy from vacuum fluctuations, materials with impossible strength. 3i Atlas's anomalous behaviour, the weird jets, the odd energy budget, might not be violations of our physics. They might be demonstrations of a broader physics we're only glimpsing in the subtle wobble of a muon. This possibility is deeply humbling. It suggests that even if we recovered an alien device, we might be like Bronze Age humans finding a smartphone. We could study its glowing surface, feel its warmth, but the concepts of semiconductors, software, and radio waves would be utterly outside our conceptual universe. The gap between our understanding and its operation would be unbridgeable without a fundamental paradigm shift. This has dire implications for contact. Communication assumes shared concepts. How do you translate a word for a force or a particle that your counterpart has no capacity to detect? Misunderstandings become not just likely, but guaranteed and potentially catastrophic. We might misinterpret a safety protocol as a threat, or a gift of technology as a weapon. This cosmic context is further expanded by the James Webb Space Telescope, which is seeing galaxies in the very early universe that are too big, too bright, and too chemically mature to exist under our current models. They formed too fast. This suggests the universe has been capable of forging stars, planets, and potentially life for billions of years longer than we thought. If habitable planets existed 10 billion years ago, then civilizations could have risen, expanded, explored, and perhaps fallen before our Earth even coalesced from stellar dust. The galaxy might not be a quiet wilderness, but an archaeological site filled with the relics of empires that spanned ages. 3i Atlas would then not be a singular marvel, but perhaps one of many such artifacts, a probe from a deep-time civilization, ancient, weathered, and silent, on a voyage set in motion when life on Earth was still single-celled slime. This perspective of a deep-time, possibly multi-sectored universe casts our current geopolitical frenzy in a tragically comic light. We are like infants in a cathedral, fighting over a shiny trinket while unaware of the vast ancient architecture surrounding us built by minds and forces we cannot comprehend. The great filter, the solution to the Fermi paradox, where is everybody, might be this very transition we are failing right now, the leap from planetary tribalism to cosmic citizenship. The silent galaxies full of ancient ruins suggested by JWST might be the graveyards of species that, like us, gained technological power before the wisdom to wield it collectively, and destroyed themselves in fear and greed. December 19th approaches. 3i Atlas will make its closest approach and continue on, indifferent to our storms. What happens next depends on a choice we have yet to make, a choice that has defeated countless species before us. The universe has provided the opportunity for billions of years. The test is not about decoding alien messages or seizing alien technology. The test is whether we can look at ourselves, see our paranoia, our tribalism, our self-destructive pride, and choose to put it down, to speak however clumsily with one voice, to listen more than we broadcast, to approach the cosmos not as competing tribes but as a conscious whole. The biggest threat to humanity encountering alien intelligence isn't the alien. It has never been the alien. It's us. Our story, the one we're writing right now in these frantic days, will be our answer to the cosmos. Will it be a story of fear, ending in a silent, self-inflicted dark age? Or will it be the first fragile sentence of a much longer story? The universe is watching. The question is, what will it see?